Hello and welcome to another episode of Topline Talks, hosted by me, Owen Myers. You'll notice today that my usual co-host and business partner, Jenna Mackey, is not joining me for our Series 2, as she had a baby 2 days ago. And so I'm going to be joined this series by different guests to help me host. So welcome to Ollie Heatherton, head of our interim practice.
Delighted to be here.
Series 2 is a series dedicated specifically to talking to what we call in the trade the C-suite. Today we are joined by Peter Benz, who is CFO of Sovereign Network Group, which is, I think it's 85,000 unit social housing provider based mostly across London, Herts, Thames Valley and the West Country. Peter has been CFO of the new organisation for over 18 months now in what I can only say must have been a pretty intense period of his career. And he's happy to join us today to talk a little bit about his background, his last couple of years, giving us insights into the housing sector. So Peter, thank you ever so much for joining us.
Good to be here.
Great. So we're going to talk a little bit about Peter's background, social housing generally, SNG, some talent insights, and we'll wrap up with our quickfire quiz. So obviously I've just given a very top line overview, but do you want to just introduce our viewers to who you are, Peter, and what you're about?
Yeah, happy to do so. So I'm, as you said, the Chief Financial Officer for SNG, Sovereign Network Group, now sort of coming up to our 18th month at the end of March. Before that, I was the Executive Director of Finance for Network Homes for almost 6 years.
Yep.
My career before then is quite wide and varied. I had a stint in social housing, but I also had sort of exposure to advertising and retail, something completely different. I'm a qualified accountant. But at the moment, we're, as you quite rightly say, focused on bringing these two organizations together. We've already made very significant progress over the last 18 months, but it has been in the context of economic and a sort of political set of uncertainties that is really unprecedented since the financial crisis, 2007, 2008.
Yeah.
So it has been very challenging, but also very rewarding. The core focus for housing association and providing good, affordable homes, I think is certainly for me a very motivating factor for doing what are often very, very complex and difficult tasks.
Yeah. Without getting too political, should we start with just your view of the political headwinds and I guess social imperative of the housing sector, and I guess the main challenges that are kind of affecting an organisation like SNG at the moment?
It's basically impossible to not be political about when talking about these subjects. Good, affordable homes lie, in my view, at the very core of a functioning society. The fact in the UK, but not only in the UK, really across the globe, is that access to housing has become an increasingly thorny issue. And that successive governments in the UK, but again across the world, have not addressed the supply side of the housing problem in to the extent that it needs addressing. A lot of the interventions have been on the demand side, and what is encouraging is that the current government is likely to do more over a shorter period of time. So it's very encouraging to hear that that is being planned. However, the real changes that certainly from the social housing sector we think are necessary have not yet transpired. We look forward to the spending review next year and hope that will bring more clarity. We're, however, also obviously aware of all of the other pressures that are faced by a government. Recent focus on increased defense spending, I think, is going to probably crowd out quite a lot of the other demands. We remain, from the housing sector, convinced that we're probably the only large-scale delivery pipeline for substantial infrastructure investment within being able to be deployed within the space of a single parliament. So with additional funding, we can be on the ground producing new units within a relatively short period of time. And that has economically dispersed effects across the country.
Yeah.
We've got existing supply chains and we've got the expertise essentially ready to go. So if we were to be unleashed, we could make very significant contributions to economic growth that isn't focused in one particular area. So we remain hopeful.
Yeah. Well, Angela Rayner, if you are listening, we're very optimistic.
Indeed.
Let's see it all happen, right? So, talk to us a little bit about. Obviously, you were at Network for a number of years. Without giving away too many trade secrets, how does a merger sort of process actually sort of start? And then be interesting just to get your thoughts as to, illustrating the work that goes into making that happen, and then we can spend a bit more time of managing change sort of over the last 18 months.
I don't think that there's any need for secrecy around this. I mean, the single biggest ingredient for a merger cake, if you will, is a lot of conversations. We started talking with Sovereign from the Network side almost 3 years ago now, and we focused on getting to know each other and very well, both on with regards to the compatibility, the financial compatibility of the two organizations, the geographical compatibility of the organizations, but also the ability of the people that are on either side to work with each other. And that is that qualitative element is probably often underappreciated in terms of its contribution to making a merger successful. We were lucky in that we found the two organizations were strategically very aligned, if structurally very, very different, and that we had some of our what can be fundamental hurdles for a merger progressing, such as overexposure to individual lenders, were absent. When we first started talking, Boris Johnson was the Prime Minister, and base rates were at 0.1%. Over the course of our merger negotiations, the political and economic foundations of the country changed.
Completely shifted. Yeah.
That required a resetting of business plans, of the proposed combined business plans, but it also required the two boards to have very fundamental conversations around how to act and deal with a crisis. I think that put a sort of foundation in place of understanding, not only in good times when you're talking about all the great things that you might be able to do in the merger, but also reacting to very real challenges that really paved the way for what's on the whole been quite a smooth process, notwithstanding the fact that there have been very many challenges. We also committed to a very extensive due diligence period, which I think was incredibly important, if very uncomfortable, which ensured that post-merger, and even prior to that, post-notification of the merger, so that's when you start saying that you're talking to each other and that you intend to merge, there haven't been substantial surprises of one part of the organization not knowing about some of the fundamentals of the other.
Yeah. And
that has the potential to, for all intents and purposes, poison the relationships if unknown things appear throughout the process that when you're already committed, essentially. So I think that's been the sort of the core part of and a not particularly pleasant process, but an absolutely essential one to get us to this point.
And so when you do the notification, so you got the heads of terms or whatever you want to call it, you do a notification. As a leader, how do you then manage sort of the communication and the change with the people? Obviously your finance and corporate functions specifically, but more broadly, because change affects people and people become uncertain, and it can affect morale and I guess their performance in their roles and things like that. So what's your experience been as to what has worked and what hasn't worked in trying to manage that message from a sort of people and a change point of view?
Yes, that's certainly been a very substantial learning process for me. What I've come away with from this process is that it's important to communicate frequently, even if you don't have all of the facts that you would like to have at your disposal. Colleagues are and have been understandably sort of uncertain, fearful, one might say, and wanted to have more certainty. Very often, that certainty we were not able to provide. But I think what helped was the frequency.
Yeah.
And sometimes we've got that right, and other times we probably could have been better on that. So if I look forward to the potential, any other potential organizational changes, that's one of the things that I would focus most on, is the frequency of communications. I always draw the parallel, if in any sort of travel situation, it's never the delay that upsets you the most. It's always not knowing.
Yeah.
And not hearing from those that are making the decisions, or that might be able to give you some information, even if they're saying, we know that you're waiting for information, but we can't give you sort of, any update at the moment, but we'll give it to you as soon as possible. Even that is better than just not knowing.
Correct. Yeah. No, that's good. That's a good analogy. I think communication generally is the silver bullet to most situations, isn't it? I think the challenge that we often see across lots of businesses is that the different ways you can communicate now. Some people prefer an in-person one-to-one chat. Some people prefer a corporate email. Some people prefer the Teams channel update. There's so many different channels you have to do that communication with, and it's just touching all points, I guess, is quite tricky to navigate so that you're kind of speaking to all people.
Yes, that's true. And I think probably the other part of sort of kind of the quality of communication is not just about the message you send, but also about the echo that you receive. So making time to not only send, but also making time to listen is important. And I think that organizational changes, particularly at the moment, are also a channel for colleagues to air frustrations that might be informed by other experiences in their life. All of our lives have become a lot more uncertain. Some of the sort of established norms, be that about how quickly prices rise, of how politicians behave, about sort of societal norms, have changed, and it's difficult to see 2-3 years into the future. So I think the reactions to some of the organizational changes are also informed, are compounded by that sort of wider sort of social uncertainty. And it's incredibly important, even if the messages are often quite challenging, to listen to them. That is part of the process, because obviously we can communicate as much as we want, but we can't take away uncertainty altogether.
Well, what's interesting is we brought a trainer in for our leadership team a little while ago about, we did a segment on Generation Gen Z, or Z, as you say in America, and the perspective is that a lot of people that are coming into the workplace, or mid-20s or below, actually they were growing up when aunties, uncles, parents were going through the GFC, and it's created an inherent distrust of the working world and the political ecosystem. And obviously the last 5 to 10 years has been crazy from that perspective. So it's interesting you mentioned that point, because that is also a generational thing, which I think is inherent in people's psyche, which isn't going to go away, and that's going to continue for probably 20-30 years, and it's going to affect the workplace quite significantly, I think. So
indeed, I mean, from straying potentially from the housing field. I mean, my general approach to these queries and challenges is that if you sort of objectively look at how the world develops, then any sense of longer term certainty is only ever a figment of our imagination, and that really everything is uncertain all the time. Life is inherently chaotic, and acknowledging that is a part of not being surprised by change. Sort of happiness is where expectation meets reality.
Yeah. Correct.
So if you adjust your expectations, then you're more likely
You'll
to be happy.
Absolutely fine. Yeah,
Indeed.
Absolutely. So 18 months in, I mean, how's it gone? And I guess what's the future of the organisation over the next sort of 5 or so? I know you sort of issued a bond last year to help fund development pipeline, etc. But yeah, what's the state on the ground, and how's the next period look for SNG?
So we've achieved a lot in 18 months. We've integrated the majority of the non-customer related teams within the organization. We've integrated the development programs. Both organizations had existing significant development programs, and one of the pull factors for the merger was the potential for increasing that already aspirational combined development program even further. We are just a month away from a transfer of engagement, so creating a single asset holding a company, and we've managed to, more from an accounting perspective, go through a full audit cycle and produce our accounts on time, which is always one of the big
no mean feat.
Yes, exactly. One of
One
of the big sort of tick boxes from me. And whilst that is more on the sort of business as usual side, there are others. Sort of other achievements, as you've pointed out, where I'm sort of particularly proud under the current circumstances to have been able to go to the market as the first organization, and I think at the time it was 18 months for our bond, have very substantial investor interest and set sort of almost a benchmark transaction there for others to sort of orient themselves against. It's very interesting and aspirational to be at SNG at the moment in the context of a lot of our other large developing peers reducing their development exposure. We are in a position to have enough headroom to continue a very aspirational development program. But it has been challenging because the market has shifted, the housing market has shifted, even though in the areas in which we develop, we still see a very substantial demand. There continues to be very substantial inflationary pressure on all construction-related and maintenance-related activities, both with in the material supply chain, but also with regards to labor and technical expertise. And we've obviously also over the last 7 years have had a number of policy interventions in our sort of core income stream, with rent reductions and rent caps, which have put significant pressure on our economic fundamentals.
Yeah.
So if you look at our financial results, we still remain a fundamentally strong organization with healthy headroom on our EBITDA MRI metrics, a healthy operating margin, a strong gearing position. But in order for us to, circling back to what we spoke about 5 minutes ago, in order for us to really be able to devote our financial strengths to delivering new homes to the market, we need additional policy interventions in order to allow us to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I wish we had more time on the pod to try and put the world to rights on some of these issues that you did, but we're not going to cover that in the next 5 minutes.
Indeed.
But, should we talk about people? I mean,
Yes.
as a recruitment podcast, obviously it'd be good to dedicate a section towards talent. How have you found over the last year or so? Because obviously, I think the HQs were based in different locations, weren't they? Like quite different locations.
Indeed.
So in terms of, I guess, pulling the teams together, what have you learned, I guess, positives and challenges from trying to do that process and get an organisation harmonising and sort of ticking nicely?
Recruiting, particularly qualified or part qualified accountants, is a substantial challenge. The merged organisation has committed to having 2 head offices, so one based in Wembley and one based in Basingstoke. That has made it more attractive from a recruitment point of view because it just widens the commuting circumference that people are willing to consider. We share the market with lots of other organizations that are looking for qualified and part qualified accountants. I think the complexity that I've just described to you, as well as the sort of social purpose that lies at the heart of what we do every day. So we're not, although we're heavily surplus focused and require strong financial parameters, we're also activity focused. We want to maximize the number of things that we do, be that investment in our existing stock, services to customers, or development of new homes. And I think that brings a wholesomeness to working at a housing association, where you're, as a finance professional, not only focused on the profit, even though that's an extremely important part of what we do. You're also focused on building what is, for all intents and purposes, a national asset, but also has national importance for the country. That remains a big draw. Also, drawing finance professionals from the private sector. But we need more of them. And I think one of the things that makes us an attractive employer is that there is the opportunity to move up, that there is the support from myself as well as senior finance managers to learn and to learn more than one sort of singular activity and move up in the world. I myself started as a filing assistant in the housing department in Brent Council just over 20 years ago.
Yeah. Well, there we go. I think it's interesting because I think, Ollie and I have worked in the social housing sector on and off. Well, Ollie always on, but me a bit on and off for our whole careers. And it's one of those sectors that is not that well, unless you're in it, it's not that well known, actually. So a lot of what we sometimes do in bringing talent is explaining the broader sort of aspects of the market and the challenges and opportunities. And when people get into it, they're fascinated, and it's difficult to leave because you get that draw to it. But I think, pulling in from other sectors can be quite challenging. But we'll share the pod, and hopefully that will help, Peter. So
Indeed.
I think we're going to try and wrap up a little bit with Ollie's quickfire quiz, which is essentially designed to give viewers a little bit more insight as to Peter in a slightly juvenile way, and I'm sure there might be some follow-up off the back of it, depending on his answers.
So the first few questions have a slightly more professional lean, with the last few questions a more personal lean. So, commercial experience or housing experience?
Both for me.
Ooh, okay. Both. We'll allow that. Potential or experience?
Well, potential.
Okay. Yeah. ACA or SEMA?
Oh, SEMA. I couldn't possibly say anything else.
On to the more personal part of the quiz. Namibia or the UK?
I can't answer that. I'm sort of a global citizen. both of those places are very important and to me, and I have my, without being wanting to be too poetic, but my heart has roots in lots of places. Those are two of them. Yes,
global citizen. I like that.
Diplomatic, I like it. I know you said no sports questions, but this is a very kind of broad and open one. It's we're not trying to catch you out here. Cricket or rugby?
Oof. With the potential of sort of annoying everyone, I'm going to say neither.
Ooh.
That's a terrible answer, isn't it? That is a terrible answer. I don't think I've ever watched a single full cricket game. Oh no, maybe once. I was at Lord's once.
Okay, yeah.
But I have watched here. This is almost the entirety of my sports knowledge now. I did watch the 1995 Rugby World Cup. South Africa against New Zealand, and South Africa won.
Oh, very good.
And that was obviously 95, 1 year after free and fair elections in South Africa. It was a big celebratory moment, and I'm really happy that I was part of.
That is your sporting heritage.
Yeah,
and after
exactly.
that, no more.
I mean, it was an incredible high point. It
Yeah.
was an incredible high point. Yeah, I remember that we were sort of driving down a sort of a main street in Windhoek, the capital of Namibia, hooting our horns. And so.
I mean, South Africa are doing, not to talk more about sport, but South Africa are doing pretty well. We're doing pretty well as well, but we'll see in the next few weekends. This is my favourite. Biltong or beef jerky?
Oh, biltong all the way. Biltong is all the way. With the dried and spiced, that's all it should have on.
Good answer.
And it's got to be lean too. So I'm for the lean biltong, not so much the fatty one.
Nice. And the final question: a braai or a Sunday roast?
Well, that depends on who's making it.
Yeah,
that depends on who's making it.
And what's on
it
the
could
braai
be
as well.
It could be both. This is the thing. I don't like choosing between things. I'm a sort of
as we're finding.
Exactly. Try everything. Taste everything. Don't be too exclusive about things. That's why I've watched one cricket match. Different times call for sort of different ingredients. I've not complied with the rules of this game at all.
It's good insight nonetheless.
It is.
It's good insight.
We see this diplomacy occasionally.
For those that sort of know you in a professional capacity, but maybe not as much in a personal capacity, but maybe you can share a little bit more about your music exploits. You were talking to us earlier as well.
Well, I don't know if you can call them exploits. I think if I'm completely honest, I'm probably a sort of a musician at heart and an accountant in the head.
Yeah.
So my sort of main instrument is the drums. I've played the drums since I was 9. I also played the violin and the piano when I was a sort of a child, a teenager. But the drums has always been my focus, and I've always tried to be in a band wherever I could. Have managed to do that now on sort of 3 continents with varying levels of success. But yes, I mean, it completely takes me into sort of another space. It's a different part of my personality. I enjoy it immensely. And that's certainly something that I'm trying to sort of pass on to my to my children. It connects you with a sort of a carnal part of being human in a way that that the accountancy just doesn't.
Yes, yeah, amazing. Well, we look forward to seeing the family band make it through the charts one day.
Yeah, exactly. You never know.
Well, look, a bit of a lighter-hearted sign-off, but that's it for today. So thank you ever so much for taking the time to share some of your thoughts and experiences. I think it's been a really insightful episode for anyone who, works within the social housing sector, and also anyone that doesn't know much about it and wants to get a little bit more of an insight into the broader market as well as SNG generally. So thanks ever so much for joining us. If you like what you hear, we have the videos published on YouTube, and the audio versions are on Spotify and Apple. But for now, that's a wrap on this first episode of our second series. Thanks for joining me, Ollie. And thanks ever so much, Peter, for making the time.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Cheers.